A young nurse lost her job after saving the life of a man that fell off a cliff. The next day, 5 SUVs arrived at her home. It was a chilly Sunday morning in Boulder, Colorado. The sun had only just begun to stretch its light across the jagged horizon. Claire, a 26-year-old trauma nurse, had learned to seek peace in unlikely places. Out here in the mountains, she could breathe. Out here, she remembered why she became a nurse in the first place, to care for life, not bureaucracy. She had just reached the crest, where the wind picked up and the trees gave way to open sky, when a sound sliced through the calm. A scream. It was human. Raw. Terrified. Claire's heart jolted. Her head snapped toward the edge of the ridge. Without thought, she sprinted forward, boots pounding dirt and gravel. The scream had come from below. Reaching the precipice, she peered over, and her breath caught. A man was dangling from a rocky ledge 20 feet down. His arms trembled with strain. One foot was wedged between two jagged rocks, the other kicking wildly. Blood ran down his temple. His face was contorted in pain and desperation. Without thinking, Claire dropped her bag and spear. Her training kicked in. Her body knew what to do before her mind did. She lay flat on the ridge and shouted, "Hold on. I'm coming." The man could barely lift his head. "Help, please." Claire scanned the slope quickly. There was a curved side trail leading down, steep and slick with loose gravel and thorny brush. She didn't hesitate. Scrambling down, she grabbed the hiking spear and stabbed it into the dirt for balance with each step. Her jacket tore open at the sleeve. Thorns slashed her scrubs. Her palms were scraped raw. But none of that mattered. She had to get to him. When she reached him, she wedged herself onto a narrow rock and planted her spear into the dirt beside her for stability. Her heart was pounding. The man's eyes rolled back as his grip began to loosen. "Hey, look at me," she said urgently. "You're not going anywhere." She looped her belt around his torso and secured it to a protruding root above, stabilizing him. Then she quickly opened her emergency pouch and pulled out gauze and antiseptic. Blood soaked through his temple. She pressed the gauze firmly, cleaning as she stabilized him with her own body weight. "You're going to be okay," she murmured. It wasn't long before she heard voices and saw paramedics descending from above. Someone had already called 911. Within minutes, ropes were lowered and rescue personnel surrounded them. But Claire had already done the most critical work. She gave them a quick report, stepped back, and let them take over. Her job was done. She didn't wait for thanks. She didn't give her name. She retrieved her bag and spear and quietly disappeared back up the trail, bloodstained, exhausted, but alive with purpose. She never looked back. She didn't know a hiker nearby had filmed the entire rescue. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds of Claire Reynolds' small apartment, drawing slanted stripes across the wooden floor. It was quiet. Too quiet. The sort of quiet that follows a day of adrenaline, of purpose, and leaves in its place a silence that feels almost suspicious. Claire sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her hands around a warm mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. She wasn't thinking much, just letting the numbness wash over her, still haunted by the sights and sounds of the cliffside rescue the day before. The man's voice, hoarse, desperate, the feel of his blood on her hands, the cold earth beneath her knees. She'd done what any trained nurse would have done, what any human should have done. And yet, in the pit of her stomach, something twisted, something uneasy. Her phone rang. She didn't jump, but her fingers clenched around the mug. The screen flashed with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A voice, professional and clinical, responded. "Claire Reynolds." "Yes. This is Human Resources at Crestview Medical. We're calling regarding a matter that's come to our attention this morning." Claire sat up a little straighter. "Footage surfaced online overnight," the voice continued. "It shows you engaged in an off-duty rescue while wearing identifiable hospital-issued clothing and carrying a visible Crestview ID badge." Claire blinked. "Wait, how do you even know it's me?" "There was enough visual confirmation to identify you, and several third-party sources linked the footage to your social media accounts. It has since gone viral." Her heart dropped. "I didn't know anyone was filming. I was hiking. I heard someone scream. I didn't even think. I just reacted. I helped him." "We understand, Ms. Reynolds. However, your actions are in direct violation of Crestview's off-duty safety and risk protocols." "I wasn't on duty," she said, voice rising slightly. "I wasn't even on hospital grounds. I was just doing the right thing." The hospital cannot afford to assume liability for employees who act in dangerous situations off the clock, especially while still visibly affiliated with the organization. Claire stood, pacing now. So you're punishing me for saving a man's life? We are enforcing policy, the voice said coldly. Your employment is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The call ended before she could formulate a full sentence. She stood in her living room, blinking at the silence. Her chest tightened. She lowered the phone slowly, then dropped it on the couch. She had saved a life. She had climbed down that cliff and used every ounce of her medical training to stabilize a bleeding, unconscious man. She had risked her own safety, not for reward or recognition, but because that's what she was, a nurse. And now she was jobless. She walked into the kitchen and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, tired, stunned, betrayed. The video was everywhere. On social media, people were calling her a hero. The nurse of the mountains, cliffside angel, real-life lifesaver. News clips showed slowed-down frames of her holding the man, patching him up, speaking words no one could hear but everyone imagined were brave and kind. But inside her apartment, there was no applause, no gratitude, just an echo of the phrase that kept replaying in her head. You're terminated, effective immediately. She sank onto the edge of her bed. Her badge still hung on the strap of her hiking bag near the door. It gleamed faintly in the light, the same way it must have shone on that video. She unhooked it, stared at her name. Claire Reynolds, RN. And then quietly, slowly, she placed it face down on the table. She had done everything right. And yet, somehow, it had all gone so wrong. The sun was just beginning to dip below the rooftops when Claire finally peeled herself off the couch. The day had been long, not just physically, but in a way that drained deeper, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Since the call that morning, her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. She ignored it. The news cycle had chewed her up and was still gnawing. Everyone had something to say about the nurse who went rogue to save a life. Everyone had an opinion, but no one really knew her. She stood in her kitchen with the lights off, watching dust creep in through the window over the sink. Her tea had gone cold again. The apartment was still, silent. Her badge lay face down on the table where she'd left it after the termination call, symbol of a life she wasn't sure she recognized anymore. That's when she heard it. A low rumble, not thunder, not a motorcycle, but the quiet, unmistakable hum of engines. Several. She walked cautiously to the window. Through the gap in the blinds, she caught the first glint of sleek black metal. Then another. Then another. Five black SUVs. Gleaming, clean, deliberate. They rolled slowly, not like they were lost or just passing by. No, this was coordinated. They didn't park haphazardly either. They aligned perfectly in front of her modest apartment complex. Engines idled in sync like some strange mechanical heartbeat. Claire's first thought was, this is a mistake. Her second thought was, this can't be about the video, can it? She took a slow step back, heart picking up speed. Her building wasn't fancy. An aging brick structure with 4 units and a front stoop that creaked. No concierge, no cameras. Nothing about it screamed VIP arrival. Yet here they were, like something out of a movie. The driver's doors of the SUVs opened almost simultaneously. Men in suits stepped out, 6 in total. All sharply dressed, black suits, earpieces, tight posture. They weren't security guards in the commercial sense. These men were polished, discreet, professional. Government? Private security? Billionaire entourage? Claire's brain flicked through the possibilities but landed on none. The passenger door of the middle SUV opened, and then he stepped out. Claire's breath hitched. Even cleaned up, even in a charcoal gray designer suit with dark sunglasses hiding half his face, she recognized him. The man she had saved. The same man who had dangled from a cliff's edge less than 48 hours ago, bleeding and begging. Now, he looked like he walked out of a Forbes feature. Confident, alive, composed, powerful. Claire stood frozen, one hand still holding the edge of the curtain. Her mind spun. What was he doing here? Why now? He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her door, flanked by 2 of the suited men who stayed a respectful 5 steps behind. The others remained by the vehicles, scanning casually, discreetly, like they were trained to make anyone feel unimportant. She didn't move. Couldn't. Then came the knock. 3 slow, calm raps on the door. Not aggressive, not hurried, but steady. Expectant. Claire's heart pounded. She glanced down at her clothes, sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. Her hair was a mess. She hadn't even washed her face. The knock came again, and with it, a voice. Deep, smooth, gentle. Miss Claire. Her breath caught. You didn't just save a man, he continued. You saved something much bigger. And now your life is about to change. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. She could feel the air shift. Something irreversible was on the other side of that door. And yet, she turned the knob. The door opened slowly, creaking slightly on its hinges. The hallway light spilled across the threshold, casting half of Claire's face in warm amber while the other stayed in soft shadow. He stood there. He had removed the sunglasses. His eyes, hazel with a fleck of gold, met hers with startling clarity. Claire was stunned, not just by his transformation, but by the intensity in his gaze. Not romantic, not grateful, but urgent, grounded, as if he carried the weight of something much larger than either of them. I hope I didn't scare you, he said, voice calm and deliberate. I wasn't expecting visitors, she replied, her voice dry. He smiled faintly. May I come in? She hesitated. Behind him, the men waited without impatience. One tapped lightly on a phone. Another scanned the street. They weren't armed in the visible sense, but Claire knew these were not random bodyguards. These men had seen things. She stepped back, holding the door wider. Sure. He stepped inside. She closed the door softly, sealing herself in with whatever this was. He took in the apartment in one glance, modest, neat, filled with the scent of cinnamon from an untouched candle on the counter. I know you have questions, he said, turning to face her. And I owe you answers. Claire folded her arms, leaning slightly against the arm of the couch. You think. I also owe you my life, he said, meeting her eyes again. But I suspect you already know that part. I remember the part where you were about to die, she said. Not the part where 5 black SUVs show up on my street. That drew a chuckle from him. Fair. He extended a hand. My name is Dominic Kessler. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm, firm. You were unconscious most of the time, she said. I never caught your name. You weren't supposed to, he said. But you caught a lot more than that, including a bullet meant for me. Claire froze. What? He nodded. You didn't notice. But the gash on my leg? That wasn't from falling. It was from a ricochet. She blinked. Wait, are you saying someone tried to kill you? Successfully, if not for you, he said matter-of-factly. And unfortunately, there's a lot more to that story. She ran a hand through her hair. So what? You're some kind of government agent? He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not quite. I run a private global operations firm. Intelligence, security, conflict resolution, depending on who's asking. Sounds vague and terrifying. It's both, he said. And someone within my own organization put a target on me. Claire sat down slowly. And you're telling me I got caught in the middle of that? You didn't just get caught in the middle. You changed the outcome. You altered the course of something much larger than either of us. If I had died on that ridge, Claire, certain plans would have moved forward. Dangerous ones. She stared at him. So what happens now? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I came here tonight because you're not safe anymore. Her body stiffened. He continued. The people who wanted me dead? They don't like variables. And you're now the most unpredictable variable of all. Claire exhaled slowly. I was just trying to help. And you did. More than you know. Which is why I can't walk away and leave you unprotected. Her eyes searched his face for signs of exaggeration, for cracks in the story. But he was terrifyingly sincere. So what? Are you offering me a bodyguard? I'm offering you a choice, he said. You can leave this all behind. Change your name. Relocate. We'll make sure you vanish, safe, protected. She raised an eyebrow. Or, he said, you join me. Claire laughed, a sharp sound that surprised even her. Join you? Doing what? Doing what you were born to do. Helping people. Saving lives. Using that instinct of yours for something far bigger than the hospital ever let you imagine. She stared at him. Everything about her life had crumbled in the last 24 hours. She'd lost her job, her peace, her anonymity. But in this strange, surreal moment, standing in a dim apartment lit by the fading light of day, a door had opened she hadn't even known existed. What's the catch? She asked. There isn't one, Dominic said. Just a decision. You saved my life. Now I'm offering you a new one. She looked out the window. The 5 black SUVs were still there, waiting. Months had passed since Claire Reynolds opened the door to 5 black SUVs and came face to face with the man she had pulled from death's edge. What she thought would be a brief, awkward thank you turned out to be the beginning of a new chapter, one she never could have written for herself. Dominic Kessler wasn't just some grateful accident victim. He was a billionaire healthcare entrepreneur, the silent force behind one of the most advanced private hospital networks in the United States. And he had come not just to express gratitude, but to make Claire an offer. "You saved my life," he said, standing in her modest Denver apartment. "Let me give you a place where you can save more." 2 weeks later, Claire stepped out of a sleek black sedan and into the soaring glass atrium of Kessler Memorial Medical Center, nestled in the foothills just outside of Denver, Colorado. The building gleamed under the morning sun, sleek architecture, tranquil gardens, and wide hallways that whispered of calm rather than chaos. She was no longer a nurse dismissed for doing the right thing. She was the chief nursing officer. At first, Claire had resisted. "I'm not an executive," she told Dominic. "I'm a trauma nurse. I belong on the floor, not behind a desk." "That's exactly why you belong here," he had replied. "I don't need another administrator in heels quoting numbers. I need someone who has bled in scrubs. Someone who knows what it's like to be awake at 4 a.m. with nothing but hope and muscle memory." The position came with a generous salary, a corner office with mountain views, and a staff of over 400 nurses. Claire kept the salary. She ignored the office, and she earned the staff. From her very first day, Claire made it clear she wasn't here to rule. She was here to build. She visited every wing, spoke to every shift, and learned every name. Nurses who expected orders got listening instead. Interns who expected indifference got mentorship. And seasoned staff who expected to keep their distance found themselves invited into policy discussions. She transformed Kessler Memorial not by command, but by compassion. Within 2 months, she had revamped the trauma triage protocol, shaving critical seconds off intake times. She fought for increased mental health services for staff, citing her own years of burnout. She established a quiet room for nurses to decompress after high-stress situations. She launched quarterly skill refreshers, not as tests, but as collaborative workshops. And Claire wasn't in meetings all day. She walked the halls. She assisted with intubations. She de-escalated families on the brink of breaking. She scrubbed in for emergency surgeries not because she had to, but because she needed to stay close to the beating heart of the job. One snowy evening, a young nurse found her mopping up after a code blue in pediatrics. "Ma'am, you don't have to do that." Claire looked up, sweated her brow, and smiled. "Neither do you. But we're here, aren't we?" That's how legends begin. They called her the Pulse. Because when she was in the building, everyone felt steadier. Word began to spread. Nurses from out of state applied just to work under her. Locals who had left the profession returned after hearing about the environment she had created. Kessler Memorial went from just another private hospital to the most respected facility in the region. Meanwhile, Claire's old hospital was facing public scrutiny. Once the viral video of her cliffside rescue caught wind again, followed by news of her being fired for saving a life, people began asking questions. The backlash was swift and relentless. Protests happened outside the facility. National nursing organizations issued public statements of support for Claire. Hashtags like #StandWithClaire and #NursesAreHuman trended on Twitter for weeks. The hospital's leadership tried to pivot. They sent a press release offering her an apology and an open invitation to return, this time as Director of Emergency Services. They even offered to name a wing after her. Claire never responded, because by then, she was no longer just a nurse or a headline. She was a movement. She received letters from across the country, from nurses who said she gave them the courage to speak up, from patients who wished more people like her existed, from young women who said she was the reason they applied to nursing school. One came from a father in Illinois. "My daughter died in a hospital hallway because the staff was too afraid of breaking protocol. I wish you had been there. I wish more of you existed." Claire cried reading that one. But she used it. She printed it, framed it, hung it in the staff lounge, next to a sign that read, "When it's right, you don't ask permission. You act." And still, Claire stayed humble. She biked to work. She volunteered on weekends at free clinics. She took night calls when the ER was overwhelmed. She refused a company car, opted out of the hospital's executive parking, and insisted her desk be positioned near the main nurse station. Dominic visited often, never to micromanage, but always with eyes that shined with quiet pride. "You've done more in 6 months than most administrators do in a decade," he told her once. "I'm not building a system," Claire replied. "I'm repairing one that forgot its heart." He never forgot that line. One day, a former Crestview nurse applied to Kessler. During the interview, she broke down in tears. "I was so afraid to care. Afraid that if I did the right thing, I'd be punished too." Claire handed her a tissue. "Not here," she said. "Here, you'll be praised for it." And she meant it. Because by then, Claire had restructured the hospital's internal response policies, ensuring that staff who stepped in during crises, even off-duty, were backed, protected, and celebrated. She brought on board a legal consultant to help draft national guidelines to protect nurses in all 50 states. She didn't just want to lead a hospital. She wanted to change healthcare. One evening, as snow fell softly over Denver, Claire stood outside the hospital, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. She was bundled in a heavy coat, sipping hot cocoa from a paper cup. Dominic joined her, quietly. "You know," he said, "I had no idea what I was doing when I made you chief nurse." She raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "I thought I was rescuing you," he said. "But you rescued the hospital. You turned it into a living, breathing promise." Claire looked at the glowing emergency entrance. "It's not about me. It never was." "I know," Dominic said, "and that's why everyone follows you." As spring approached, so did new opportunities. Medical schools asked her to speak. Podcasts requested interviews. Her name was floated for national leadership in nursing reform. But Claire always returned to the floor. Because no matter how high her title, she believed healing started not in offices, but at the bedside. She kept her badge clipped just under her collarbone. It read, "Claire Reynolds, Chief Nursing Officer, Kessler Memorial Medical Center," but if you asked any of the nurses, they'd tell you. She was just Claire, the one who understood, the one who showed up, the one who made it safe to care again. Exactly 1 year to the day since she descended a cliffside trail to save a stranger's life, Claire Reynolds returned to Boulder. Not in scrubs, not carrying gauze or grit or grief, but as a woman transformed. There was no press release, no red carpet, no convoy of SUVs this time. Just Claire, in a navy blue dress, her hair swept simply off her shoulders, stepping out of a quiet black sedan and onto the stone steps of Boulder's historic city hall. It was late spring, and the trees lining Pearl Street were in full bloom, pink petals dotting the pavement like scattered confetti. The air smelled of fresh beginnings. To the world, her story had faded into legend, whispers of a nurse who saved a life, lost her job, and rose to lead one of Colorado's most respected hospitals. She'd refused interviews, turned down awards, declined every glossy magazine cover. Her silence had spoken louder than any quote ever could. Until now. Word had leaked just hours before the ceremony. Claire Reynolds was in Boulder. The city buzzed. Reporters rushed to the courthouse steps. Camera crews adjusted their lenses. No one had seen her in public since her appointment at Kessler Memorial Medical Center. But the reason for her return wasn't for a headline. It was for something much quieter and far more enduring. Dominic Kessler had arranged a private event inside City Hall. Just 150 people. No fanfare. No national anchors. Just community leaders, medical professionals, and people whose lives had been touched by her work. At the front of the grand chamber hung a dark velvet banner embroidered with gold. The Nightingale Fund, in honor of selfless care. The initiative, founded by Dominic and seeded with $10 million of his own money, would offer grants, emergency legal protection, and wellness resources to frontline medical workers who risked everything to do the right thing, just like Claire once had. She hadn't wanted the name. She fought him on it. In fact, "I don't want this to be about me," she told Dominic. "It isn't," he said. "It's about what you represent. Quiet courage. The kind the world needs more of." As the ceremony began, Claire sat in the front row, barely visible beneath the soft wash of light from the grand chandelier above. Beside her sat Dominic, hands folded, his usual stoic calm intact. Behind them were dozens of nurses, EMTs, doctors, social workers, even janitors, people who had, like Claire, acted when no one else would. A judge took the podium first, then the mayor, then a child, 8 years old, who had once been pulled from a burning house by a medic whose training had been funded by a program Claire implemented. Then it was time. The MC paused as the lights dimmed slightly. "And now," he said, "the woman who thought she had lost everything and gave us all something worth believing in." The crowd stood as Claire approached the stage. No music, just the sound of her quiet heels on the polished wood. She reached the podium and paused, eyes scanning the room. There were people from her past and present, former colleagues, hospital staff, patients. The hiker who had filmed the cliff rescue sat in the back row, teary-eyed. Her old manager from Crestview had sent a letter, but Claire had chosen not to read it. She took a breath, then spoke. "When I first came to Boulder, I thought this would be the place where I'd build my life quietly. I thought nursing was just a job, just a skill I could use behind the scenes. But life has a strange way of interrupting your plans." She looked down, briefly collecting herself. "I didn't know that helping someone, acting on instinct, would get me fired. I didn't know that a belt and a first aid kit on a mountain trail would start a storm. I didn't know that silence would become my shield. And I certainly didn't know that a man I didn't recognize at the time would change the course of everything." She glanced at Dominic, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I thought I was being punished for doing the right thing," she said, voice steady now. "But sometimes, losing everything is how you find what you were meant to become." A quiet gasp spread across the room, and a moment later, the audience rose in a unified, heartfelt ovation. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was reverent. Some clapped slowly, wiping away tears. Others stood with hands folded over their hearts. Claire stepped back from the podium, not basking, but humbled. This was never the point. But somehow, standing there in the building where city awards were usually handed out for economic milestones and clean energy grants, she realized her story had become a symbol, not of heroism, but of reclamation. She had been discarded for caring too much, and now she was being honored for it. After the ceremony, Claire didn't stay long. She gave hugs, shook hands, shared a quiet word with the nurse whose story had mirrored her own. But then she slipped out the side exit, into the twilight, where the press waited but never got a word. Dominic found her sitting on a park bench behind City Hall, watching the sun lower behind the trees. "You ran from your own ceremony," he said. "I didn't run. I just finished." He sat beside her. "What happens now?" Claire sipped from a thermos she'd brought. "I go back to work. We've got 2 new pediatric interns starting next week. One of them gets queasy at the sight of blood. I promised to coach him through it." Dominic laughed. "Of course you did." She looked at him. "What happens to people like me, Dominic? People who fall through the cracks of the system for doing what they're trained to do." He smiled. "They get funded. They get lifted. They get protected." She nodded once, softly, and together, they watched the sky turn a soft amber. Claire Reynolds didn't become famous for being perfect. She became unforgettable for being human. And that day in Boulder, beneath the weight of the mountains and a year's worth of transformation, the world finally stood still, just long enough to say thank you. If you enjoyed Claire's incredible journey, from a trauma nurse in Boulder to the chief nursing officer at Kessler Memorial Medical Center, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about how Claire Reynolds was treated after saving Dominic Kessler's life? How do you feel about her transformation and the launch of the Nightingale Fund? Drop your rating of this story on a scale of 1 to 10 in the comments section. Also, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing our community come together from all over the world. Your support helps us bring more inspiring and emotional stories like this to life. Thank you for being here.